What if the thing blocking your growth is not your talent, not your circumstances, not your opportunity, but your reaction to being corrected? Most people don't fail because they lack knowledge. They fail because they reject discipline. And Proverbs 12:1 says something most people don't want to hear. If you hate correction, you are choosing ignorance. Tonight, we confront the ego. Correction rarely feels gentle. It feels sharp. It feels exposing. It feels personal. And in that moment, when someone points out a flaw, a mistake, a weakness, something inside us reacts before reason has time to speak. That reaction reveals more about us than the mistake ever could. Proverbs 12:1 states with startling clarity, "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction is stupid." The language is not softened. It is not diplomatic. It does not say misguided or immature. It draws a direct line between the love of correction and the love of knowledge, between the hatred of correction and self-imposed ignorance. This is not an insult. It is a diagnosis. To love discipline is to love adjustment. To love adjustment is to accept that you are not yet complete, and that acceptance requires humility. The ego, however, resists this violently. The ego wants to appear competent. It wants to maintain status. It wants to preserve an image of control. Correction threatens all three. When someone corrects you, even gently, the ego interprets it as exposure. They see a flaw. They see a gap. They see something I failed to see. And instead of evaluating whether the correction is true, the mind immediately searches for defense. It looks for flaws in the messenger. It constructs counterarguments. It shifts blame. It reframes context. Anything to avoid this simple, uncomfortable possibility. I was wrong. There are two kinds of people in moments of correction. The first listens to understand. The second listens to respond. The first asks, "Is this accurate?" The second asks, "How do I protect myself?" The difference between these two reactions determines trajectory. Because growth is impossible without adjustment, and adjustment is impossible without awareness. And awareness often comes from outside your own perspective. We are blind to many of our own patterns. You cannot see your own tone while speaking. You cannot fully perceive your own emotional shifts. You cannot detect every subtle inconsistency in your reasoning. That is why feedback exists. That is why correction exists. It is a mirror. And mirrors are not enemies simply because they reveal something you did not intend to show. Yet many people treat mirrors like attackers. Imagine an archer aiming at a distant target. If the arrow leaves the bow 2 degrees off course, the deviation is invisible at first, but distance magnifies small errors. After enough time, that arrow will land far from where it was intended. Correction is the act of adjusting the angle early when the deviation is still small. It may sting to be told your aim is off, but it is far more painful to miss the target entirely after years of silent misalignment. The person who loves discipline understands this principle deeply. They do not crave criticism, but they crave accuracy. They do not enjoy being wrong, but they fear remaining wrong more. They measure themselves not by how often they are affirmed, but by how often they are refined. The person who hates correction lives in a fragile system. Their confidence is built on the illusion of consistency rather than the pursuit of truth. They prefer to maintain a stable self-image rather than confront instability in their behavior. But this stability is false. It is a stagnation disguised as strength. Correction does not diminish you. It clarifies you. And clarity is the foundation of knowledge. The tragedy of rejecting correction is not that you feel offended. It is that you choose blindness. Every uncorrected mistake becomes repetition. Every repetition becomes habit. Every habit becomes character. And character shapes destiny. There are individuals who 10 years later are still repeating the same relational mistakes, the same financial errors, the same communication failures. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack opportunity, but because they lacked receptivity. Someone tried to point something out. A mentor hinted. A friend advised. A partner confronted. And instead of examining the truth, they defended their ego. When correction is rejected consistently, something more dangerous happens. People stop offering it. They recognize resistance. They recognize defensiveness. They recognize the subtle hostility toward feedback. And so they remain silent. Silence is not approval. It is withdrawal. The most alarming position is not being corrected. It is no longer being worth correcting. If no one challenges you, it may not mean you are flawless. It may mean people have concluded that you are closed. In environments of wisdom, correction is normal. It is expected. It is part of culture. People sharpen each other. They speak directly. They do not confuse accountability with hostility. Growth is prioritized over comfort. In environments of fragility, correction is taboo. Truth must be softened beyond recognition. Language becomes cautious. Feedback is diluted. And over time, standards quietly decline because no one wants to risk tension. But tension is often the birthplace of refinement. The ego fears tension because tension exposes imperfection. Wisdom embraces tension because tension produces alignment. You must decide which you value more, the protection of your image or the improvement of your reality. Correction feels like a threat when identity is built on appearing right. But it feels like a gift when identity is built on becoming better. There is a subtle but powerful shift that happens in mature individuals. They begin to separate themselves from their mistakes. Instead of saying, "I am wrong," they say, "That was wrong." Instead of experiencing correction as an attack on their worth, they see it as information about their behavior. This distinction changes everything. If your worth is tied to being flawless, correction will always feel unbearable. But if your worth is secure, correction becomes a tool. It becomes data. It becomes insight. It becomes an opportunity to recalibrate before deviation compounds. Consider this carefully. The only people who never need correction are those who never attempt anything meaningful. Action invites error. Leadership invites scrutiny. Ambition invites feedback. The more responsibility you carry, the more visible your mistakes become. Therefore, resistance to correction is often disguised fear of responsibility. To grow in competence, you must tolerate exposure. And exposure requires humility. Humility is not self-deprecation. It is accuracy. It is the recognition that your current level is not your final level, that your perspective is not complete, that your interpretation may be flawed, that others may see angles you cannot. When Proverbs says that whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, it is linking two inseparable forces. Discipline is the process of shaping behavior. Knowledge is the expansion of understanding. You cannot expand understanding without reshaping behavior. And you cannot reshape behavior without accepting correction. To hate correction is to freeze yourself in your current form. And stagnation is rarely obvious at first. It feels stable. It feels consistent. It feels safe. But slowly, others advance. They adapt. They refine. They evolve. While you remain committed to defending a version of yourself that should have been upgraded long ago. Ego whispers, "Protect your pride." Wisdom whispers, "Protect your future." One preserves temporary comfort. The other builds long-term strength. Ask yourself honestly, when someone challenges you, what rises first, curiosity or defensiveness? Do you search for truth, or do you search for justification? Do you feel gratitude for clarity, or resentment for exposure? These reactions are not small. They are directional. Because the person who embraces correction compounds growth. Every piece of feedback becomes a stepping stone. Every mistake becomes refinement. Every uncomfortable conversation becomes elevation. The person who rejects correction compounds stagnation. Every piece of feedback becomes conflict. Every mistake becomes denial. Every uncomfortable conversation becomes distance. Over time, the gap between these two people becomes enormous, and it did not begin with talent. It began with posture. Correction is not humiliation, it is calibration. If you can learn to pause in the moment of discomfort, before defending, before reacting, before countering, and ask, is there truth here? You unlock a level of growth most people never reach. You do not need to accept every criticism blindly, but you must be willing to examine it honestly. Because even poorly delivered feedback can contain useful information. The ego wants immediate relief. Wisdom wants long-term accuracy. And the choice between those two is made in seconds. If you love discipline, you love the process of becoming more aligned with truth. If you hate correction, you choose the illusion of stability over the reality of growth. So the question is not whether correction feels uncomfortable. It always will. The question is whether you value comfort more than clarity. Because the future you are building depends not on how often you are praised, but on how well you are corrected, and whether you are mature enough to receive it. Correction does not only challenge behavior, it challenges identity. That is why it triggers such a strong internal reaction. When someone points out a flaw, the mind does not merely process information, it evaluates threat. It asks, does this reduce my status? Does this expose weakness? Does this change how I am perceived? And before logic intervenes, defense mechanisms activate. Psychologists describe this as ego defense. When identity is tightly fused with performance, any critique of performance feels like a critique of self. If you believe I am my competence, then discovering incompetence feels like discovering personal inadequacy. But this fusion is the root of fragility. Because performance fluctuates, skills evolve, knowledge expands. If identity cannot survive correction, it cannot survive growth. Correction hurts because it creates cognitive dissonance. You carry an internal image of yourself capable, disciplined, reasonable. When someone presents evidence that contradicts that image, tension arises. The easiest way to relieve tension is not to adjust behavior. It is to reject the feedback. Denial restores internal comfort instantly. Adjustment requires effort. And humans naturally gravitate toward immediate relief. But immediate relief is expensive long-term. The strongest individuals understand this pattern. They recognize that discomfort in the present prevents disaster in the future. They do not wait to be corrected. They actively seek feedback. They ask difficult questions. Where am I weak? What am I not seeing? What blind spot is limiting me? This posture feels risky, but it accelerates growth dramatically. Why? Because blind spots are invisible by definition. You cannot correct what you cannot see. And the more responsibility you carry, leadership, influence, authority, the more dangerous blind spots become. A small misalignment in a private life affects few. A small misalignment in leadership affects many. Strong individuals understand that unchecked ego destroys credibility. They have seen talented people collapse because they refused input. They have watched careers stall because pride blocked adaptation. They have witnessed relationships decay because defensiveness replaced accountability. So they build systems that force humility, mentors who speak directly, teams that are encouraged to challenge ideas, environments where truth is valued over hierarchy. This is not weakness, it is strategic self-protection. But there is another layer. Not all correction is equal. Some correction is constructive, some is careless. Some is motivated by growth, some is motivated by insecurity. Wisdom requires discernment. You must learn to differentiate between useful correction and destructive criticism. Constructive correction focuses on behavior, not identity. It is specific, not vague. It seeks improvement, not humiliation. It may be firm, but it is purposeful. Even if delivered imperfectly, its core intent is refinement. Destructive criticism attacks character broadly. It lacks clarity, it exaggerates. It seeks dominance rather than development. It leaves confusion rather than direction. A wise person does not absorb every negative comment emotionally. but they do evaluate every comment rationally. Even criticism delivered poorly can contain fragments of truth. The immature person discards everything because of tone. The mature person extracts value despite tone. This ability to extract value is a superpower. It means you are no longer dependent on perfect teachers. You can grow even from flawed messengers. You are not paralyzed by delivery style. You are anchored in truth-seeking. Another reason correction feels painful is because it interrupts momentum. You may believe you are progressing smoothly. Feedback forces a pause. It forces reevaluation. It slows you down temporarily. But slowing down to adjust alignment prevents accelerating in the wrong direction. Think of a builder constructing a foundation. If someone identifies a structural miscalculation early, stopping to fix it feels costly. Time is lost. Effort is redone. Pride may be bruised, but ignoring it guarantees collapse later. Correction is rarely convenient. It is preventative. There is also fear beneath resistance. Fear of inadequacy. Fear of exposure. Fear of losing authority. Some individuals reject correction because they believe admitting fault will weaken their influence. In reality, the opposite is true. Authority deepens when accountability is visible. Respect increases when humility is demonstrated. People trust those who can say, "You are right. I missed that. I will adjust." They distrust those who never admit error. Ironically, the attempt to preserve power through defensiveness erodes power over time. Teams disengage. Trust deteriorates. Innovation slows. Growth stagnates. All because ego was prioritized over refinement. Correction is the gateway to mastery. In every discipline, athletics, music, leadership, scholarship, the highest performers rely on constant feedback. Coaches dissect performance frame by frame. Mentors critique detail relentlessly. Experts invite scrutiny. They understand a principle that the insecure resist. Precision requires correction. Without correction, repetition hardens flaws. And flaws repeated become limitations. If you examine individuals who plateau, you will often find a common thread. They stopped receiving input, either because they believed they had arrived, or because others stopped offering it. Plateau is rarely about capacity. It is about posture. The posture of the strong is simple. There is more to learn. This mindset transforms correction from threat to opportunity. Instead of shrinking when confronted, they expand. Instead of defending instantly, they inquire. Instead of arguing reflexively, they reflect. But this discipline must be intentional. In the moment of correction, pause. Resist immediate reaction. Ask clarifying questions. Can you give an example? What would improvement look like? Where specifically did I misstep? Precision reduces emotional distortion. And after the conversation, evaluate calmly. Separate tone from content. Separate ego from evidence. Seek patterns. If multiple people identify similar issues, it is unlikely coincidence. Patterns reveal truth. This does not mean becoming submissive to every opinion. It means becoming committed to growth beyond comfort. There is a dangerous illusion that confidence means certainty. True confidence is the stability to withstand being wrong. It is not fragile. It does not collapse under scrutiny. It adapts. It refines. It strengthens through exposure. Fragile confidence avoids examination. Strong confidence invites it. When Proverbs declares that whoever hates correction is foolish, it is not condemning emotion. It is condemning refusal. Feeling discomfort is natural. Remaining closed is destructive. You will always have a choice in moments of correction. Defend or develop. Protect image or pursue improvement. Resist or recalibrate. Over time, these micro-choices define macro outcomes. The person who embraces correction compounds competence. Every adjustment sharpens clarity. Every refinement elevates standard. Every hard conversation increases resilience. The person who resists correction compounds limitation. Every defense solidifies blind spots. Every denial reinforces weakness. Every avoided conversation deepens stagnation. Correction is not your enemy. It is your ally disguised as discomfort. And those who understand this do not merely tolerate it, they seek it. Because they know something the ego refuses to admit. Growth without correction is an illusion. And mastery begins the moment pride steps aside. If correction feels like an attack to you, it means your identity may be tied to being right. But growth requires something stronger than pride. We are going deeper. Why does correction hurt so much? Why do strong men seek feedback? And how do you separate truth from toxic criticism? Let's continue.